It was a cold winter evening when my friend Jake and I decided to take a road trip to an old, abandoned asylum rumored to be haunted. The tales of the asylum were infamous in our town, stories of tortured souls, strange sounds in the night, and shadows that moved on their own. We had heard it all, but curiosity and the thrill of adventure pushed us to explore this dark chapter of local history. As we drove through the winding roads, the sky turned a deep shade of indigo, and the trees loomed like twisted fingers reaching for the heavens. The air was thick with anticipation, and as we approached the asylum, its crumbling facade loomed over us like a giant specter. The building had once been a place of healing, but had long since fallen into disrepair, its windows shattered and walls covered in creeping vines. We parked the car and grabbed our flashlights, the beams cutting through the thickening darkness. As we stepped out, an eerie silence enveloped us. The only sound was the crunch of gravel beneath our feet as we made our way to the entrance. The heavy wooden doors creaked open with a push, revealing a dark hallway that seemed to stretch into infinity. Inside, the air was stale, filled with the scent of mold and decay. We shone our flashlights around, illuminating remnants of the past, rusted gurneys, peeling paint, and old medical equipment that hinted at the horrors once inflicted within these walls. The atmosphere was thick with dread, but we pressed on, driven by adrenaline and a sense of adventure. As we explored room after room, we stumbled upon what appeared to be a patient's quarters. The walls were covered in strange scribblings, frantic messages that sent chills down my spine. "They won't let me go," one read. "I can hear them at night," another warned. It was unsettling, but we laughed it off as mere remnants of a troubled mind. We ventured deeper into the asylum until we reached the basement, a place that felt alive with an energy we couldn't explain. The air grew colder, and an oppressive weight settled on our chests. We exchanged nervous glances, but decided to descend the narrow staircase anyway. Each step echoed ominously, amplifying our growing unease. At the bottom, we found ourselves in a large room filled with rusted cages and old medical instruments. In the corner stood a solitary chair, its leather cracked and worn. As we approached it, I felt an inexplicable urge to sit down. I brushed off Jake's warnings and plopped into the chair, but as soon as I did, a wave of nausea washed over me. I could almost hear whispers creeping into my mind, soft, pleading voices that seemed to come from nowhere. "Get out!" I suddenly shouted, standing up abruptly. Jake looked at me with concern. "What's wrong?" he asked. I shook my head, trying to shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong. That's when we heard it, a low moan emanating from the shadows. We froze, our hearts pounding in unison as we turned our flashlights toward the sound. The beam danced across the walls until it landed on a figure standing at the far end of the room, a woman in a tattered hospital gown, her hair hanging in matted strands over her face. She stood completely still, her eyes hidden in darkness. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible, yet filled with desperation. Jake and I exchanged horrified glances. This couldn't be real. We had come seeking thrills, not to encounter something so profoundly disturbing. The woman stepped forward, her movements jerky and unnatural. "They won't let me leave," she repeated, her voice rising in pitch. I felt an icy grip around my heart as I stumbled backward. "We need to go," I shouted, grabbing Jake's arm and pulling him toward the staircase. But as we turned to flee, the shadows around us thickened, swallowing our light and plunging us into darkness. Panic surged through me as I felt something brush against my leg, a cold hand grasping at my ankle. I screamed as I jerked away, falling to the ground. Jake pulled me up just as we heard the woman's voice again, this time louder and more frantic. "Don't leave me. You can't leave." We bolted up the stairs two at a time, adrenaline fueling our escape. The whispers grew louder behind us, echoing through the hallways like a chorus of lost souls begging for release. We burst through the front doors and into the night air, gasping for breath as we stumbled away from the asylum. But as we reached the car, I realized something was wrong. Jake wasn't beside me anymore. Panic set in as I turned back toward the asylum, only to see him standing at the entrance, his expression vacant and eyes wide with terror. "Jake, come on!" I yelled, but he didn't move. Instead, he raised his hand slowly as if trying to reach for something just beyond my sight. "Help her," he murmured, his voice distant and hollow. "No, we have to go," I screamed, terror clawing at my throat as I rushed back toward him. But before I could reach him, shadows enveloped Jake, swallowing him whole. "Jake!" I cried out in desperation as I lunged forward, But it was too late. He vanished into thin air as if he had never been there at all. A chilling silence descended around me as I stood alone in front of the asylum. The whispers returned, swirling around me like a tempest of sorrow and despair. "Help us," they pleaded. "You must help us." I stumbled back toward my car, heart racing and mind reeling from what had just happened. The weight of loss pressed down on me as I realized that Jake was gone, lost to whatever malevolent force resided within those walls. I drove away from that place as fast as I could, tears streaming down my face. The road blurred before me as I fought against despair and terror. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me home, a lingering presence that whispered in my ear at night and haunted my dreams. Days turned into weeks, but Jake never returned. I reported his disappearance to the authorities, but they found no trace of him, no evidence he had ever been there at all. It felt like a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. Haunted by guilt and fear, I couldn't escape the memories of that night, the woman's desperate plea for help echoing in my mind like a siren's call. I became obsessed with uncovering the truth about what had happened to Jake and those lost souls trapped within the asylum's walls. After extensive research, I discovered that the asylum had a dark history, patients subjected to cruel experiments and left to suffer in isolation. Many had died without ever receiving help or compassion. It became clear that their souls were bound to that place, eternally searching for someone to hear their cries. Driven by guilt and sorrow for my friend's fate, I returned to the asylum one last time, determined to confront whatever darkness lay within and find a way to free Jake's spirit. Armed with only a flashlight and my resolve, I stepped inside once more. The air was heavy with despair as I made my way back to the basement, the heart of darkness where it all began. The shadows loomed larger than before, whispering my name in haunting tones that sent shivers down my spine. "Jake!" I called out into the void. "I'm here. I'll find you." As I descended into the depths once more, a chilling wind swept through the room. The whispers grew louder until they became a cacophony of voices, some pleading for release while others screamed in agony. "Help us! Help us!" I reached the room with the cages again and saw her, the woman from before, standing in front of me once more. Her eyes were hollow pits of despair as she reached out toward me. "Help him," she begged. "He's trapped like us." With newfound determination, I stepped closer to her. "How? How can I help?" "The key is in their pain," she whispered urgently. "You must confront their suffering." Suddenly, visions flooded my mind. Images of torment and anguish played out before me. Patients screaming for mercy while being restrained. Shadows lurking in corners. Echoes of laughter twisted into something sinister. I closed my eyes against the onslaught of horror, but forced myself to remember Jake, the laughter we shared, his dreams for the future, and let that love guide me through the darkness. "I'm here for you," I shouted into the void. "I won't abandon you." The shadows recoiled momentarily before surging toward me like a tidal wave of despair. But instead of succumbing to fear, I stood firm against their advance. "I release you," I declared with all my might. "You are not forgotten. You deserve peace." The shadows writhed violently around me as if caught in a storm. Whispers transformed into anguished cries before suddenly falling silent. A blinding light erupted from within me, a warmth that enveloped everything around me. When it faded away, I found myself standing alone in an empty room, the shadows gone in silence surrounding me like a comforting embrace. But then I heard it, a soft voice calling my name from behind me. "Thank you." I turned around to see Jake standing there, his expression peaceful, yet filled with sorrow for what had transpired. "I thought I lost you," I said breathlessly as tears streamed down my face. "You saved me," he replied softly. "You gave them what they needed." In that moment of connection between us, a bond forged through love and sacrifice, I knew we had both been changed forever by our encounter with darkness. Together we left that place behind, two souls forever intertwined by shared experiences etched into memory, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, hope could shine through if only we dared to confront it head-on. As we stepped outside into the cool night air once more, hand in hand, I felt lighter than ever before, no longer burdened by guilt or fear, but instead filled with gratitude for every moment spent together, and every lesson learned along this harrowing journey through life's shadows. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when my two boys, Ethan and Noah, and I decided to take a weekend trip to our family's remote cabin in the woods. The cabin had been passed down through generations, a place filled with laughter and cherished memories. But as we drove along the winding dirt road, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different this time. The trees loomed overhead like dark sentinels, their branches twisting into eerie shapes against the gray sky. A chill ran down my spine, but I brushed it off as just my imagination. The boys were excited, chattering about all the adventures we would have. Little did they know, this trip would turn into a nightmare. As we arrived at the cabin, the familiar creak of the wooden door sent a shiver through me. The air inside was stale, untouched since our last visit. Dust motes danced in the beams of light, filtering through the grimy windows. I tried to ignite some enthusiasm in the boys as we unpacked, but an unsettling weight hung in the air. That evening, after dinner, we gathered around the fireplace. The flames crackled, casting flickering shadows that danced along the walls. I told them stories of our family's history in the cabin, tales of ghostly encounters and strange happenings that sent shivers down their spines. They loved it, laughing nervously as they imagined the spirits of our ancestors watching over us. As night fell, a thick fog rolled in outside, enveloping the cabin in an otherworldly silence. The boys grew restless, their eyes darting toward the windows as if expecting something to appear. I reassured them that it was just the wind playing tricks, but deep down, I felt it too, a sense of being watched. "Can we go explore outside?" Ethan asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. "No way. It's too dark out there," I replied firmly. "We'll wait until morning." But as the hours passed, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed listening to the wind howl outside, feeling an inexplicable dread settle over me. Just as I began to drift off, a loud thud echoed from downstairs. My heart raced as I sat up, straining to hear over the storm. "Mom," Noah whispered from the other bed. "What was that?" "I don't know," I said, trying to sound calm. "Stay here." I tiptoed down the creaky stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. The living room was dark except for the faint glow of embers in the fireplace. As I reached the bottom step, another thud reverberated through the silence, this time coming from the kitchen. I hesitated, fear gripping me like a vice. Gathering my courage, I crept toward the kitchen door and pushed it open slowly. The sight before me made my blood run cold. A chair had been knocked over, and a cold breeze swept through the room, causing the remaining chairs to rattle ominously. "Hello!" I called out, my voice trembling. There was no answer, only silence. Just then, I heard soft giggling coming from upstairs. My heart dropped as I recognized it. The boys were supposed to be asleep. Panic surged through me as I rushed back up the stairs, calling their names. "Ethan! Noah!" I shouted, bursting into their room. But it was empty, the beds perfectly made, no sign of them anywhere. "Boys!" I cried out in desperation, my voice echoing off the walls. A sense of dread washed over me as I stumbled back into the hallway. The giggling grew louder, echoing from down the hall toward the attic. Against my better judgment, I followed the sound, each step feeling heavier than the last. The attic door stood slightly ajar, a dim light flickering inside. I pushed it open and stepped into the darkness. The attic was cluttered with old furniture and boxes covered in dust. In the center of the room stood a small table with two chairs facing each other. On one chair sat a doll, its porcelain face cracked and eyes wide open, staring directly at me. "Ethan? Noah?" I called again, my voice shaking with fear. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the attic, extinguishing the flickering light and plunging me into darkness. I fumbled for my phone to use its flashlight when I heard their laughter again, this time closer and more sinister. "Mommy!" came Noah's voice from somewhere in the shadows. "Where are you?" I shouted back, panic rising within me. "Up here!" Ethan's voice echoed eerily around me. I turned toward their voices, but they seemed to come from every direction at once. My heart raced as I stumbled backward into a pile of boxes. Just then, a cold hand grasped my ankle from beneath the floorboards. I screamed and kicked it away. "Mommy!" Noah's voice cried out again, sounding more frightened than ever. I scrambled to my feet and ran toward where their voices seemed to be coming from, toward a small door at the far end of the attic that had always been locked during our previous visits. It stood slightly ajar now, an unsettling light spilling out from within. "Boys!" I yelled again as I pushed open the door and stepped inside. What lay before me was an old playroom filled with toys and dolls that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. A dusty rocking horse stood in one corner, while a small table was set for tea with mismatched cups and plates. In the center of the room stood Ethan and Noah, frozen in place with vacant expressions on their faces. My heart sank as I approached them cautiously. "Boys, are you okay?" I asked, reaching out to touch Ethan's shoulder. As soon as my fingers made contact, they turned to look at me, but their eyes were empty, lifeless like those of the doll on the chair in the attic. "Mommy," they whispered in unison, their voices echoing eerily around me. Panic surged through me as I realized they weren't themselves anymore. Something had taken hold of them, something evil that lurked within this cursed place. Suddenly, laughter erupted around me, high-pitched and gleeful, as shadows danced along the walls. The door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. I turned frantically to find it locked tight. "Let them go!" I screamed into the darkness surrounding us. "Whatever you are, let them go." A figure emerged from the shadows, a woman draped in tattered white garments with long black hair cascading down her back like a veil. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light as she approached us slowly. "They belong to me now," she hissed, her voice dripping with malice. "They've played so nicely." "No!" I shouted desperately as I lunged forward to grab my boys' hands. But they slipped away from me like smoke, lost to whatever darkness had consumed them. The woman laughed again, a chilling sound that echoed in my ears as she reached for them. "Join us," she beckoned sweetly. "You can stay forever." In that moment of despair, I felt something deep within me awaken, a primal instinct to protect my children at all costs. "No!" I screamed again, summoning every ounce of strength within me. The room began to tremble as shadows swirled around us. Toys rattled violently on their shelves while echoes of laughter morphed into cries of anguish. The woman's face twisted in rage as she fought against my will. "Leave them alone!" I roared defiantly as light began to pierce through the darkness surrounding us, blinding and pure. With one final push fueled by love for my boys, everything erupted into chaos. The room shattered around us like glass breaking apart until suddenly, silence fell heavy upon us once more. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself lying on the cabin floor, the sun pouring through windows illuminating dust motes dancing in warm light. Confused and disoriented, I scrambled to my feet and called out for Ethan and Noah once more, but there was no answer. Panic surged anew as reality crashed down around me. They were gone. Desperation clawed at my throat as memories flooded back, their laughter echoing in my mind now twisted into something hauntingly sorrowful. I searched every inch of that cabin, calling their names until my voice grew hoarse, but there was no sign of them anywhere, only remnants of what once was, a family torn apart by darkness lurking within those walls. Days turned into weeks without any trace of Ethan or Noah. Authorities searched tirelessly but found nothing, only whispers among townsfolk about strange happenings surrounding our family cabin now abandoned forevermore. As autumn faded into winter's chill outside those walls filled with memories long buried beneath layers of dust, I remained trapped within despair, knowing deep down that whatever malevolence resided there had taken everything from me, leaving only echoes behind, forever haunted by what once was. I don't know how to explain this without sounding insane, but I promise, this happened exactly as I'm telling it. We've lived in this house for almost 5 years. 2 floors, 3 bedrooms upstairs, an unfinished basement. Nothing fancy. It's always been enough room for me, my wife, and our 2 kids. We know every corner of it, or we thought we did. About 2 weeks ago, my daughter was playing hide and seek with her younger brother. He couldn't find her, and she wouldn't come out. After 10 minutes, I started calling for her, and eventually found her sitting in the hallway, pale, staring at the wall. I asked what happened, and she said, "I was hiding in the small room with the black carpet." There's no such room in our house. I assumed she was making something up or mixing it up with a dream. But that night, curiosity got the better of me. After everyone went to sleep, I started walking around, checking closets, crawl spaces, anything. And then I noticed something strange in the hallway upstairs. The wall between our bedroom and the bathroom had always seemed thicker than it should have been. I tapped it. Hollow. Just drywall. I followed the lines and realized something was off. The measurements didn't add up. So I cut into the wall. Behind the drywall was a door. A real one. Old. Covered in dust. No handle, just a keyhole. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I told my wife. She thought I was joking until she saw it. We argued about opening it. She wanted to call someone, maybe a contractor, but I couldn't wait. That night, I took a screwdriver and pried the door open. Inside was a small room, maybe 10 by 10 feet. Black carpet, just like my daughter said, but nothing else. No lights, no furniture. Just a single window that didn't lead anywhere, just a solid brick. We never noticed the missing space because it didn't show from the outside. It wasn't part of the house's blueprint. I stepped inside and instantly felt heavy. The air was thick, like it didn't want me there. But the worst part? There were drawings all over the walls. Childlike. Dozens of them. Stick figures. All with their eyes blacked out. Some were hanging. Some were crying. And in the center of the wall, in what looked like a child's handwriting, it said, "Don't let him out again." I sealed the door that night. We don't talk about it anymore. And every time I walk down that hallway, I feel like something's watching from behind the wall, waiting. When I was in college, I took a semester off to help take care of my uncle. He lived alone on a rural stretch of land outside town, nothing around but cornfields and quiet. Harrow Lane was a dead-end road, and his house was the last one before the woods swallowed everything up. He'd been acting strange, according to my mom. Said things like, "The woods are watching again," and started keeping all the windows covered, even during the day. I figured he was just lonely, maybe losing it a little. So I moved in to help with errands, meals, whatever he needed. The first few nights were fine, calm, quiet. But every night, just before 3 a.m., the house would creak. Not old wood creaks. Footstep creaks, starting in the back hallway and slowly moving toward my room. Every time I'd sit up, listening, and nothing ever came. One night I asked him about it. He just shook his head and said, "Don't open your door until it's light outside." Ever. I thought it was paranoia, until that Friday. That night, the creaking started earlier, 2:43 a.m. I checked the time because I remember waking up and seeing the clock glowing red. Then came the scratching. Not on the floor. On my door. Light at first. Then more deliberate. Like something was testing the wood. I whispered, "Uncle?" But I heard his voice from down the hall, shaky and low. "Don't open it." The scratching stopped. The creaking moved away. The next morning, I found deep gouges in the wood, 4 long claw marks. Not like a cat. Too wide. Too even. I confronted my uncle. He looked so tired. So hollow. "I let it in once," he said. "Back in '84. It doesn't want to leave now. It's attached to the house." That night, I didn't sleep. Around 2:50, I went to the living room and sat with the lights on, waiting. At 3:02 a.m., the front door unlocked itself. I didn't move. The knob turned slowly. Then it stopped. Nothing came in. But when I checked the porch in the morning, there were muddy, barefoot prints, leading from the forest to the door, and none going back. I used to work maintenance at a private boarding school out in Vermont. The campus was huge, sprawling grounds, multiple dorms, and a massive main building that dated back to the 1800s. Most of the time, I worked alone. That was fine by me. There was one part of the campus they didn't use anymore, the north wing. It had been closed off years before I got there, due to structural issues. But here's the thing. Every few months, we were told to go check it for leaks, mold, or rodents. Just to stay ahead of any liability. No one ever wanted that job. Eventually, I volunteered, thinking I'd get some quiet time. I wish I hadn't. The north wing was cold. Colder than it should have been. Dust everywhere, air thick like wet concrete. The hallways were long, empty, and completely silent. Until you reached the last door on the right. Room 213. I'd walk by it and hear whispering. Always just low enough that I couldn't make out words, but loud enough that I knew it wasn't my imagination. At first, I thought maybe it was the wind in the vents or some old speaker system humming. But the rest of the wing was dead silent. No airflow. No power. Nothing. One time I got brave, or stupid, and opened the door. The room inside was empty. Just a single chair facing the far wall. But the second I stepped in, the whispering stopped. Not faded, stopped. Like it was holding its breath. I stood there, waiting for something to happen. Then the door slammed shut behind me. I spun around and yanked it open. No one was there. No wind. No explanation. I left and didn't look back. Later that night, back in my apartment, I found dust on my shoes and a smear of something black on my pant leg. I washed it off. Thought maybe it was oil from a pipe. But then I started hearing whispers at home. Same tone. Same rhythm. Always around 2 a.m. I'd wake up to the sound of someone speaking just outside my bedroom door. The worst night? I finally recorded it. When I played the audio back, I could hear it clearly. You sat in his chair. I never went back to room 213. 2 months later, the north wing burned down. They blamed faulty wiring. But there was no power running to that part of the school. This happened 4 years ago. I've barely talked about it since. People either think I'm lying or losing it. But I know what I saw. My friends and I used to go hiking every fall. It was tradition. Pick a new trail, camp overnight, drink by the fire, and tell stories. That year, we chose an area in the Appalachian Range, deep woods off a state route, totally off-grid. The forest there was old, heavy, like it remembered things. We hiked 6 miles in and made camp near a clearing. Everything seemed normal until after midnight. That's when we heard the screaming. It came from the trees, high, distant, not quite human. Too long, too dry, like something imitating a person but not getting it right. We thought it was an animal, until we heard the voice. "Help me!" My friend Josh shouted back, thinking someone was actually hurt. But the voice repeated itself. Exactly the same words, same tone, same inflection, over and over. "Help me, help me, help me." Then the whispering started. Thousands of voices, all around us. No wind, no movement, just sound. Like the forest itself was breathing words. Josh grabbed a flashlight and ran into the trees shouting, "Hello, where are you?" We tried to stop him, but he was gone. 10 seconds later, the whispering stopped. Dead silence. We searched until sunrise. Never found him. We called in search and rescue. They combed the woods for 5 days. Nothing. Not a shoe. Not a shred of fabric. Then, on the 6th day, we found his phone. It was lying perfectly centered in that same clearing. Like someone had placed it there. We turned it on and looked through the camera roll. There was a photo. Just one. Taken at 3:17 a.m., the time he vanished. It was a blurry shot of the forest, too dark to see much, but in the corner, barely lit by the flash, was his face. Just his face. His mouth was open wide like he was screaming, and his eyes were completely black. That photo was dated 1 day after he went missing. We left that morning and never went back. None of us speak about it, but sometimes I still dream about the voice in the woods, repeating that broken phrase. "Help me." But now, in the dream, it sounds like Josh. About a year ago, I bought a box of old photography gear at an estate sale. Mostly junk, dusty lenses, cracked filters, a broken Polaroid camera from the 80s. But in the bottom of the box was something strange. A thick manila envelope labeled, "Do not open, property of MG." Of course I opened it. Inside were about 50 Polaroid photos. All of the same thing, a dark hallway. Each photo taken from the same angle, looking straight down that hallway toward a closed door at the end. Same grainy lighting. Same shadows. Nothing special. At first. Then I noticed something. In the very last photo, there was a figure. Standing at the end of the hall. Just barely visible in the shadows. Tall, slim, with his head tilted too far to the side like it was broken. No facial features I could make out. Just pale skin and total stillness. I showed my wife. She said it gave her the worst feeling, like someone was standing right behind her while she looked at it. She made me put the photos away. That night, we both woke up at exactly 3:33 a.m. No noise. No nightmare. Just awake. In the hallway outside our room, we heard a creak. Then another. Slow, heavy footsteps. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. Opened the door. Nothing there. But the air smelled like something wet and old, like moldy wood left to rot in a basement. We didn't sleep. Over the next few nights, things got worse. I started seeing the man from the photo. In reflections. In the corner of my eye. Once, I swear I saw him standing inside our hallway. Same broken neck, same stare. But when I blinked, he was gone. I burned the photos the next day. All of them. But that night, taped to our front door, was a single Polaroid. The hallway again. Same view. Only this time, the door at the end was open. I never really thought much about memory. I mean, people forget things all the time, right? Misplacing your keys, walking into a room and forgetting why, forgetting if you locked the door or turned off the oven. It's just life. But what if you started losing more than just the little things? It started 3 months ago. I found a photo tucked behind a book on my shelf, me and someone else. A man I didn't recognize, standing next to me like we were best friends. I was smiling, holding up a peace sign. On the back it said, "Me and Hollow 2020. I've never known anyone named Hollow. And I never took that picture. But there it was. Me, same haircut, same house in the background. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe a prank. Maybe I was losing track of time. Then it got worse. One morning I woke up with a deep, clean cut across my palm. Not a scratch, surgical. I had no memory of how it happened. There was blood in the sink. A trail of it, but it was dry, like it had been there for hours. My bandages were in the trash, already used. Only, I hadn't wrapped it yet. That same week, I came home and found a jacket hanging on the hook by the door. I never bought it. It didn't fit me. Inside, stitched neatly on the tag, were two initials, EH. I started to feel like my life was being edited when I wasn't looking. Like someone was splicing in pieces of someone else's existence. Then came the mirror. I don't spend a lot of time looking at myself. I'm not vain. But one night, brushing my teeth, I noticed something off. My reflection blinked slower than I did. It sounds insane, I know. But I tested it. I'd lift my left hand, so would the reflection. I'd smile, it would smile. But when I leaned in close, real close, my reflection didn't quite match. The smile was just a little wider. The eyes just a little too still. I backed away. Thought maybe it was stress, sleep deprivation, anything but what I was really starting to believe, that whatever was in the mirror wasn't me. The next night, I turned off all the lights and stared into the mirror by candlelight, just watching. And that's when I saw it, a door. Not in my room, only in the reflection. It was barely visible at first. A narrow wooden door in the corner of the room behind me. Brass hinges. A keyhole. I turned around quickly, nothing. But in the mirror, it was clear as day. Every night after that, I saw the door more clearly. It was getting closer. Each night, inching forward in the reflection, like it was moving toward me while I slept. And then one night, the door was open. Inside the mirrored door was blackness. Not empty darkness, but something thick. Something that pulsed. I leaned in, and my reflection leaned in too. But then it stopped. My reflection kept moving. It stepped forward into the black room in the mirror. One step, two, gone, and I was left staring at an empty reflection. No me, just the room, the open door, and that space behind it, humming. I ran. I tried to cover the mirror with a sheet, but the next morning, the sheet was on the floor, and the mirror was clean. Too clean, like it had never been touched. But I hadn't dusted that mirror in months. The reflection was back, but it wasn't right. My reflection would tilt its head, just slightly, whenever I stood in front of it. Not when I moved. When I was perfectly still, like it was studying me. The final night, I woke to the sound of glass creaking. That thin, high-pitched strain of something pushing against it. I sat up, and across the room, I saw movement. The mirror. There were fingerprints on the inside of the glass. 5 of them, pressing out, slowly, like something was trying to crawl through. Then a face. My face. Smiling. But not with my eyes. And behind it, a man. Wearing that same jacket. EH, stitched into the front. His eyes were solid black. Mouth stitched closed, like it had been sewn shut long ago. And still he smiled. I ran. I left everything behind. Moved across the city. I haven't looked into a mirror since. Not really. Not longer than a glance. Because sometimes, even now, in dark windows or the shine of a phone screen, I see something standing behind my reflection. Smiling. Waiting. And one day, I know, my reflection won't come back. I still don't like talking about that night. It was supposed to be a quick weekend getaway, just me, my wife, and the kids. We rented a cabin up in the mountains, completely off-grid, no cell signal, no Wi-Fi. Just nature. The first night was peaceful, crackling fireplace, the kids roasting marshmallows, stars overhead. But the second night, something changed. Around 2 a.m., my wife shook me awake. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I listened, nothing. Then a soft knock. Not at the front door, the window. I got up, heart pounding, and peeked out. No one there. Just darkness. The trees swaying. I told myself it was a branch. Maybe a raccoon. I went back to bed. 10 minutes later, another knock. This time louder. Closer. My son came running into our room, terrified. "There's someone outside my window." I grabbed the flashlight and went out with the dog. The woods were still. Too still. I scanned the tree line, and that's when I saw it. Not a person. Not exactly. A pale face, low to the ground, watching me. Smiling. I ran inside, locked everything, and stayed up until daylight. When we packed up and left the next morning, my daughter asked, "Dad, who was that man playing in the woods last night?" We never went back. It was a chilly autumn evening when my friend Alex and I decided to visit a quaint little cafe that had recently opened in our town. The place was known for its cozy atmosphere and unique drinks, but what really drew us in were the rumors of its haunted history. The cafe had been built on the site of an old Victorian house where a tragic event had occurred. A family had mysteriously vanished one fateful night, leaving behind only unanswered questions and lingering spirits. As we entered the cafe, the warm glow of the lights and the rich aroma of coffee enveloped us, momentarily distracting us from the stories we had heard. We settled into a corner booth, the wooden table worn smooth by years of use. The cafe was surprisingly busy, with a mix of locals chatting and laughing, but there was an undercurrent of tension in the air that I couldn't quite place. We ordered our drinks, pumpkin spice lattes for both of us, and settled in for what we thought would be a relaxing evening. As we sipped our coffees, we began to discuss the legends surrounding the cafe. Alex, always the skeptic, dismissed the tales as mere ghost stories meant to attract customers. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about the place. The atmosphere shifted as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the cafe. The laughter and chatter seemed to fade into a low hum, and I could sense an unease settling over the room. Just then, our barista, a young woman with striking green eyes, approached our table with a knowing smile. "Are you two here for the ghost stories?" she asked playfully, her tone light but her eyes serious. "What do you mean?" Alex replied, intrigued. "The cafe has its share of tales," she said, leaning in closer. "Some say they've seen figures moving in the windows at night or heard whispers when no one is around. Just last week, a couple claimed they felt someone brush them when no one was there. I felt a chill run down my spine as she spoke. Have you ever seen anything?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Once, I thought I saw a little girl in a white dress standing by the window. But when I looked again, she was gone." Alex scoffed, but I could tell he was intrigued. "What happened to the family that lived here?" he asked. "They vanished without a trace," she replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Some believe they were taken by something that still lingers in this very cafe." Just then, the lights flickered ominously, and a sudden draft swept through the room, causing the barista to shiver. She quickly excused herself and returned to the counter, leaving us with an unsettling feeling. As we continued our conversation, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The cafe's ambience had shifted from cozy to claustrophobic, and every creak of the floorboards seemed amplified. We finished our drinks and decided to take a stroll around the cafe, hoping to ease our nerves. We wandered through a narrow hallway lined with old photographs of the original Victorian house. Each picture depicted a moment frozen in time. Happy family gatherings, children playing in the yard, but there was an underlying sadness in their smiles that sent shivers down my spine. As we reached the end of the hallway, we noticed a door slightly ajar. A faint light flickered from within, and curiosity got the better of us. We exchanged glances before pushing the door open. Inside was a dimly lit room filled with dusty furniture and remnants of what once must have been a cozy sitting area. In one corner stood an old rocking chair that creaked eerily, as if someone had just vacated it. A chill ran through me as I stepped further inside. Suddenly, we heard a soft giggle echoing through the room. We froze, exchanging terrified looks. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. "Yeah," Alex replied, his voice barely audible. "Let's get out of here." But before we could leave, we heard it again, a child's laughter followed by soft footsteps approaching us from behind. My heart raced as I turned around slowly, expecting to see nothing but darkness. To our horror, there stood a little girl in a white dress, her hair cascading down her shoulders like wisps of fog. Her eyes were wide and innocent, but there was something unsettling about her presence, an aura of sorrow that enveloped her like a shroud. "Play with me," she said softly, her voice sweet yet haunting. "No, we should go," I stammered, backing away slowly. The girl's expression changed. Her smile faded into a look of desperation. Please don't leave me, she pleaded, her voice echoing in my mind like a distant memory. Just then, the door slammed shut behind us with a deafening bang. Panic surged through me as I turned back to face her. What do you want? I shouted, my voice trembling. I want to go home, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. They took me away. I'm lost. I felt a wave of sympathy wash over me despite my fear. Who took you? I asked gently. Her gaze shifted toward the corner of the room, where shadows danced ominously. The shadows, they come for me at night. Before I could respond, the temperature dropped dramatically, and an overwhelming sense of dread filled the air. The girl's expression morphed into one of terror as she pointed toward the darkness behind me. They're here. I turned around just in time to see dark shapes emerging from the shadows, figures cloaked in darkness that seemed to writhe and twist as they approached us. Their whispers filled my ears like a cacophony of despair. Help us, help us! I grabbed Alex's arm and pulled him toward the door, but it wouldn't budge. The shadows closed in around us, their voices growing louder and more frantic. You must help her, help us. In that moment of sheer panic, I realized that these were the spirits of the family that had vanished. The same ones whose laughter once filled this place now turned to sorrow and despair. Please, I shouted desperately at the girl. How can we help you? She looked up at me with wide eyes filled with hope and fear. You have to remember what happened. Suddenly, images flooded my mind, visions of a family gathered around a table, laughter echoing through the halls before everything went dark. I could see them trapped in a cycle of torment, unable to escape their fate. Let us go! I cried out to the shadows surrounding us. Release them! The figures paused for a moment, as if considering my plea. The girl stepped forward timidly and whispered something inaudible into the darkness. Then everything erupted into chaos. The shadows surged forward with an angry roar, while I clung tightly to Alex. Run! I yelled as we pushed against the door with all our strength until it finally swung open. We stumbled out into the hallway, gasping for breath as we sprinted toward the exit. Behind us, we could hear anguished cries echoing through the cafe, a cacophony of voices pleading for release. Just as we burst through the front doors into the cool night air, everything fell silent behind us. We collapsed onto the pavement outside, hearts racing and minds reeling from what had just transpired. What just happened? Alex panted, looking pale and shaken. I don't know, I replied breathlessly. But we have to tell someone who can help them. We hurried back to our car and drove away from that haunted cafe as fast as we could manage. But even as we put distance between us and that place, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us, a lingering presence that whispered in my ear whenever silence fell around me. Weeks passed without incident until one night when I woke up suddenly from a deep sleep. My heart raced as I felt an icy hand resting on my shoulder, cold fingers brushing against my skin like whispers from beyond. I turned around slowly but found nothing there, only darkness enveloping me like a shroud. Yet deep down inside me lingered an understanding. Those lost souls were still trapped somewhere between worlds, waiting for someone brave enough to confront their pain and set them free. And though fear gripped my heart each time I thought back on that night at the cafe, I knew that somehow, someday, I would return, not just for myself but for them, for all those who had been lost along with their laughter echoing through time's corridors forevermore. When I was 10 years old, my grandfather warned me never to follow the sound of whistling in the woods. He lived out in the Appalachian foothills, way off the map, on land passed down through generations. His house was full of strange relics, iron charms above every door, salt at every windowsill, old animal bones carved with runes. He told me they weren't decorations. He called them locks. I asked him once what they were locking. He didn't answer. Every summer I visited him, and every summer he told me the same thing. If you hear whistling from the trees after dark, you run. You don't listen. You don't answer. And you never follow it. I thought he was just old and superstitious. I'd laugh it off. That changed the summer I turned 17. It was late July. I was alone in his house. He'd gone into town for supplies. Just me and the woods outside, thick and quiet and deep. I was messing around in the attic when I found a trunk I'd never seen before. It was locked, but the latch was rusted to hell. I pried it open. Inside was a journal. My great-great-grandfather's, dated 1883. The pages were warped, yellowed, but still legible. It was filled with ramblings, drawings of symbols, strange maps of the surrounding woods. and page after page labeled only. The Whistler. One entry stood out. The handwriting was frantic. The tomb is real. We sealed it with iron, but it calls. It always calls. The sound is not meant for human ears. God help any soul that answers the song. That night I heard it, just after midnight, faint but clear, whistling, coming from the tree behind the house. 3 notes. Slow. Repeating. It didn't sound human, but not animal either. It was wrong. Like something mimicking music, but not understanding how it worked. I remembered the warning. I stayed in bed, covered my ears. But the next night it came again, closer. And on the 3rd night, I couldn't help myself. I went outside. The moon was high. The woods were silver with its light. I followed the whistling, through brush, over a stream, deeper than I'd ever gone. And then silence. I stepped into a clearing and saw it. A mound of stone, half sunken into the earth, covered in roots and moss. At its center, a sealed iron door, bolted with thick chains and old padlocks. All rusted but intact. Etched into the stone above it was a symbol I'd seen in the journal. An eye, with a line slashed through it. The second I looked at it, I felt a pressure in my head, like something was watching me from inside. I turned to run, and heard it, loud, behind the door, a long, low whistle. Not 3 notes this time, just one, drawn out like a warning or a threat. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed by the window, waiting for sunrise. When my grandfather returned the next morning, I told him everything. His face turned white. He didn't get angry. He didn't shout. He just looked at me like someone who had already mourned me. Then he said, "You heard it now. That means it knows you." He took me to the old church near the edge of town. Not for prayers, for protection. An old woman there gave me a small iron ring, carved with symbols, and told me never to take it off. Ever. I wore it for years. The whistling stopped. The dreams faded. But last month, I lost the ring. And 3 nights ago, I heard it again. Outside my apartment. In the city. Hundreds of miles from that old forest. 3 notes. Slow. Getting closer. When I was 9, my older brother, Aaron, disappeared in the woods behind our house. We lived in a rural town in Maine. Nothing but trees, 2 gas stations, and a school with more rumors than textbooks. Aaron was 13. He used to scare me with stories about witches and monsters that lived in the forest. But there was one story he told me over and over again, always with a smirk. There's a clearing back there, real deep. If you find it and wait long enough, someone will sit across from you. Not a person. Not really. But they'll look like one. And if you ask them anything, they'll tell you the truth. The catch, he said, was simple. You can only ask one question. And once you do, you're never the same. I thought he made it up to freak me out. But then one September afternoon, he went into the woods. Told my mom he was just going to explore. He never came back. Search teams combed the woods for weeks. Nothing. Not even a piece of clothing. No footprints. Like he evaporated. They called it a tragic disappearance. But I knew. I knew he went looking for the clearing. After that, everything changed. My parents fell apart. I barely spoke. I'd sit by the tree line for hours, staring into the woods, hoping to see him walk out. 10 years passed. Then I started dreaming about him. Every night for a week, I saw Aaron, sitting in a gray fog, on the other side of a clearing. His skin pale. Eyes wrong, like they'd been borrowed from someone else. He never spoke in the dreams. He just stared, until the 7th night, when he finally opened his mouth and said, "It answered my question." I woke up screaming. That night, I made a decision I never told anyone about. I went into the woods. I didn't bring a flashlight. No compass. Just a notebook with one question written inside. Where did Aaron go? I walked for hours. Maybe longer. The forest felt endless. The trees didn't look the same. At some point, I realized I hadn't seen an animal or bird in miles. No wind. No sound. Just static silence. Then I found it. The clearing. Perfectly round. Dead grass in the center. A smooth, flat rock on either side like seats. I sat. And I waited. Minutes passed. Then hours. The sun didn't move. The shadows didn't shift. I started to think I was trapped in some loop. Until I looked up, and someone was sitting across from me. It was Aaron. Or something wearing Aaron's face. His skin was too smooth. Eyes too black. Mouth stitched in a thin, impossible smile. And when he spoke, his voice didn't come from his mouth. It came from behind me. Ask your question. My throat went dry. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Ask. I pulled the notebook from my pocket. I didn't even open it. I already knew the question by heart. Where did Aaron go? He smiled wider and said, he took your place. I didn't understand at first. Then he stood, and I couldn't. My legs wouldn't move. My body was stuck, like the air around me had solidified. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would break my ribs. The thing that looked like Aaron stepped toward me, still smiling. One question, one answer, one trade. Then everything went black. When I woke up, I was standing at the edge of the woods, drenched in sweat, scraped up, bleeding from my hands and face. My house was just beyond the trees, and sitting on the porch was Aaron, older, like he'd aged 10 years, laughing with my mom, wearing my clothes, drinking from my mug. They saw me, and didn't recognize me. They called the police. I tried to explain, but nothing I said made sense to them. They told me I must have escaped from some mental facility, that there was no missing brother, that I was the one who'd disappeared years ago. Now I'm sitting in a room with padded walls. I can still hear him. Every night, he whistles outside the window, and he always says the same thing. One question, one trade. The Whispering Shadows. In a small, isolated town, nestled between dense forests and steep hills, there existed an old mansion known as Blackwood Manor. The townsfolk spoke of it in hushed tones, warning children to stay away from its crumbling walls and darkened windows. Legends whispered of the family that once lived there, the Blackwoods, who had mysteriously vanished one stormy night, leaving behind only shadows and secrets. Years passed, and the manor fell into disrepair. Vines crawled up the sides of the house, and the roof sagged under the weight of time. Yet, despite its dilapidated state, it continued to draw the curiosity of many, especially thrill-seeking teenagers. Among them was a group of 4 friends: Sarah, Tom, Lisa, and Jake. They were drawn to the manor one fateful Halloween night, eager to prove their bravery. "Come on, it'll be fun," Sarah urged, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "What's the worst that could happen?" Tom, always the skeptic, raised an eyebrow. "You really think we should? I mean, people say it's haunted." "Haunted or not, it's just an old house," Lisa chimed in, her voice steady. "We'll be fine. We'll just go in, take a few pictures, and leave." Jake, the most adventurous of the group, grinned. "I'm in. Let's show this place who's boss." As they approached the manor, a chill swept through the air. The wind howled like a mournful spirit, and the moonlight barely pierced through the thick clouds overhead. The front door creaked open as if inviting them inside. Hesitating only for a moment, they stepped over the threshold into darkness. The interior was a time capsule of decay, dust-covered furniture, peeling wallpaper, and cobwebs that hung like curtains in every corner. Their flashlights flickered as they explored room after room, each filled with remnants of a life once lived. Old portraits lined the walls, the eyes of the subjects seeming to follow their every move. "Look at this!" Lisa exclaimed, pointing to a dusty piano in the parlor. "I wonder if it still works." She sat down and pressed a key. A haunting note echoed through the hallways, sending shivers down their spines. Suddenly, a loud thud resonated from upstairs. "What was that?" Tom whispered, his bravado fading. "Probably just the wind," Jake said dismissively, but even he felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Curiosity piqued, they decided to investigate the source of the noise. They climbed the creaking staircase, each step echoing ominously in the stillness. As they reached the second floor, they found themselves in a long hallway lined with doors. "Let's check this one," Sarah suggested, pointing to a door at the end of the hall. They pushed it open to reveal a dimly lit room filled with old furniture draped in white sheets. In the center stood a large mirror, its surface clouded with age. As they approached it, their reflections shimmered strangely in the glass. "Do you see that?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. "It looks like shadows moving behind us." They turned quickly but found nothing there, just darkness stretching behind them. Dismissing it as a trick of the light, they continued exploring until they heard soft whispers echoing through the halls. "Did you hear that?" Tom asked nervously. "It's probably just the wind again," Jake replied, though he too felt uneasy. But as they moved deeper into the manor, The whispers grew louder and more distinct. They could make out words, fragments of conversations that seemed to swirl around them like a fog. Help us. Trapped. Never escape. Panic set in as they realized they were not alone. Shadows flitted just beyond their vision, darting in and out of sight. The air grew heavy with a sense of dread as they stumbled upon an open door leading to a darkened cellar. "We should get out of here," Tom urged, but Jake was already stepping inside. "Come on, this could be awesome." Reluctantly, the others followed him down into the cellar. The air was damp and musty, and their flashlights barely illuminated the stone walls. In one corner lay an old trunk covered in dust. "What do you think is inside?" Lisa asked. "Only one way to find out," Jake said with a grin as he knelt beside it and lifted the lid. Inside were old photographs and letters belonging to the Blackwood family. As they sifted through the contents, they uncovered a diary that belonged to Eliza Blackwood, the last surviving member of the family. Her entries spoke of strange occurrences in the manor, voices calling to her from the shadows, and an overwhelming sense of despair that enveloped her. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the cellar, extinguishing their flashlights. Panic surged as darkness engulfed them. The whispers crescendoed into frantic cries for help. "Get out! Get out!" Sarah screamed. In a frenzy, they scrambled towards the stairs but found themselves disoriented in the pitch blackness. The whispers morphed into anguished wails that echoed off the walls. "Help us! Help us!" Just as they thought they would be lost forever, Jake stumbled upon a faint glimmer of light emanating from a crack in the wall. "This way!" he shouted. They rushed towards it, pushing against the cold stone until they broke through into an adjacent room. A small library, filled with dusty books and cobwebs. In their haste to escape, they didn't notice that one book had fallen open on the floor. As they caught their breath, they looked around frantically for an exit when suddenly they heard a soft voice behind them. Stay with us." They turned to see shadowy figures emerging from the corners of the room, ghostly apparitions of the Blackwood family. Their faces were twisted in sorrow and desperation. "Please, don't leave us," one whispered, reaching out with translucent hands. The friends were paralyzed with fear as memories flooded back. The stories they had heard as children about how the Blackwoods had been cursed to roam their home forever. The realization hit them hard. They had unwittingly entered a realm where time stood still, a place where souls were trapped between life and death. "We have to go!" Tom yelled as he grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her towards what appeared to be another exit. The shadows closed in around them as they raced through darkened hallways that seemed to shift and change before their eyes. The whispers grew louder and more frantic, echoes of sorrow pleading for release. Finally, bursting through a door into what seemed like daylight, they stumbled outside into the cool night air. But as they looked back at Blackwood Manor, it was no longer standing there. Instead, only shadows danced where it had been. Breathless and shaken, they vowed never to speak of that night again. But as time went on, each friend began to experience strange occurrences, whispers in their ears when alone, fleeting shadows at the edge of their vision. One by one, they started disappearing, first Lisa, then Tom, until only Sarah and Jake remained. Desperate for answers, they returned to where Blackwood Manor once stood but found nothing but overgrown weeds and silence. As Jake turned to leave, he felt a cold hand grip his shoulder. He spun around but saw no one there, only darkness creeping back into his mind. "Sarah!" he called out in panic. "We have to go!" But when he turned back to find her, she was gone, swallowed by shadows that whispered her name. Years passed in silence until one day a new group of teenagers stumbled upon an abandoned lot where Blackwood Manor had once stood. They exchanged stories about ghosts and curses as they dared each other to enter what remained a mere memory buried beneath time's relentless march. And as they crossed that threshold into darkness once more, echoes of laughter turned to screams, the cycle beginning anew as whispers filled the air. Help us, trapped, never escape.